Reaction continues to pour in tonight following Donald Trump's reciprocal tariff announcement. Those long-awaited details were made official just a few hours ago, and Chuck Davidson, President and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, joins me now live to share his thoughts. Chuck, Trump is calling this Liberation Day for the U.S. What's your reaction to what you heard today?
Well, I think if you watched the press conference, you would have thought that it was going to be a difficult day for the majority of the world, including Canada. I think when you look at the details in regards to what was in some of the written context as well, it appears as though Canada is going to fare much better than a number of other countries. Specific in regards to going back to some of that tariff, some of the tariff areas, specifically in regards to industries that were CUSMA supported. And so for a lot of industries, whether it be ag or manufacturing, it's going to almost be business as usual for now. And so that's the good news. On other fronts, whether it be on car manufacturing, whether it be on steel and aluminum, potentially on lumber, there will be the 25% tariff. So that will prove problematic for parts of the economy that will continue. I think what we found today, though, as well, is that I think the end reality is that we can no longer say that we have this reliable trading partner south of the border. We've had a long-standing relationship with the U.S., billions of dollars in trade on an annual basis go back and forth, $18 billion from Canada and Manitoba specifically to the U.S., $23 billion that we import. I think that relationship has been impacted to the point where we need to start looking at what are our other options. And I think this is something that we need to take into effect as of today, even though that I think we got a bit of a reprieve, is that looking at the long-term game of what's going to be in the best interest of both the Manitoba and the Canadian economy.
You know, speaking of other options, we're hearing from officials in Mexico just this hour who are actually saying they could potentially benefit from what was announced today. They, like us, were exempt from that 10% baseline tariff, and they're saying that this could open up new opportunities in the market because the tariffs on those other countries could maybe give them some, room to make some deals. Could Canada also see some benefits as a result of what we heard?
Yeah, I think it's too early to really provide comment on that, Marilee, but I do think, this is going to be, what we've developed right now is we have this global trade war. And what, everyone I think was happy today that we weren't on that chart that President Trump was putting out there in terms of determining what the tariff was going to be on a variety of different countries. And so what is that going to mean from a global perspective as well? And so that area of free trade around the world has been changed. Will Canada benefit as a result of this? I think for sure we'll be able to look at the U.S. as we still have that relationship. But what's going to be important for Canada specifically is that we don't become complacent and we don't become reliable on that. And I think this is the message that we've been sending to both the provincial and the federal government. Continue to reduce those barriers in Canada, continue to support Canadian businesses, continue to look at how we can fast track any kind of key economic projects that can help us to develop and to get into some of those other markets. I think that's going to be critical at this point in time, is that we don't take for granted what's happened. And we look at this as really a pivot point for Canada to look at some of those other markets. And so then we could be in the same position as a Mexico to say, how do we benefit coming out of this?
Yeah, those 25% auto tariffs that are set to go into effect tonight, Trump says this is going to result in, jobs and factories roaring back to the U.S. Is there any concern we could see some job losses or moves from this province? We do have New Flyer here, MacDon. What are your thoughts on that front?
I think a lot of those companies are going to be okay under this. I think there's obviously concerns with a company like Gerdau and the steel manufacturers and aluminum manufacturers. We don't have aluminum in Manitoba, we do have steel. What the impacts are going to be there. So this is going to be critical as well for how government responds to this, both at a provincial level and at a federal level. So there's been talk about sort of retaliatory tariffs coming in place probably as early as tomorrow. What kind of supports the provincial government has put in place? We know in the provincial budget, they provided some dollars potentially for agriculture that if they were going to be needed. We've suggested that also happened to help support some of these businesses that may be impacted specifically that are not able to get around the tariff issue. And so that's going to be important over the next couple of days as we get more details on exactly what this is going to mean for Manitoba and for Canadian businesses to make sure that government is providing the supports. And hopefully at the end of the day, we can get on the same level and those tariffs will be a 0% and a non-issue for all businesses in this country.
We are in the midst of a federal election campaign. How strongly do you think our country should respond to this trade war?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one in terms of, and we've heard from a number of businesses in terms of how specific we want to be on sort of retaliatory tariffs. We don't want to do anything that's going to negatively impact businesses and their local supply chains, but there does need to be some sort of a response. And so that's going to be important. The bigger response, though, is continuing to make sure that we're making those investments so that we can open up those other markets. Reducing that reliance, Trump-proofing our economy, as they like to say, is probably more important, and getting that leadership from both the provincial and the federal government and taking that direction.
Well, definitely developing news. Chuck, we appreciate your time and take on all of this tonight. It was great speaking with you.
Always a pleasure, Marilee.